Estimados amigos,
Distinguished friends, I call to order the 12th meeting of the 15th session of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Distinguished members of the Forum, distinguished observers and friends, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now begin our consideration of Agenda Item 5, discussion on the theme Indigenous Peoples, Conflict, Peace and Resolution. This is special interest for the Forum because we're going to hear the different situations and the different interpretations of the reality in the different regions of the world which the indigenous people have for peace, in particular with regard to conflict and resolution. During these days, we have heard a series of complaints, demands, positioning of different sectors, from different peoples, from different regions of the world, on the aspiration for peace, on seeking the end to conflicts, to tragedy and crises, on the struggle of the people for resolution. Today, the world is living in a context where the interests of resources in many regions are winning over the interests and the positions for peace and our people's wish to have peaceful societies. There were a series of demands and requests to states, to organizations, and to the rest of society to fight together and build societies which live in peace, which have guarantees for the resolution, so that the peace will be a sustained peace, but in particular that will overcome poverty, inequality, discrimination and exploitations experienced by people. It's the challenge of humanity, a search for peace. It's a constant in the world to put an end to conflicts. It is our only possibility. Our only possibility is resolution. This morning we'll begin with a round table on the theme of this year. I repeat, indigenous peoples, conflict, peace and resolution. I extend a warm welcome to the members of the panel who are joining us here today. Mr. Akli Sheikh Abasada of the Tuareg people, Mr. Juvenal Arrieta of the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia, Mr. Nyangulo Chrome from India, Mr. Johannes ANARI of West Papua. I also welcome today moderators who will help us to collect the concerns and what approaches we should take and to facilitate our dialogue. Mr. Devashish Roy, member of the Forum, and His Excellency Mr. Philip Towler, the Deputy Permanent Representative of New Zealand to the United Nations, to whom I give the floor to moderate the panel discussion. Mr. Devashish Roy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for the introduction. It is my great pleasure to co-moderate this panel discussion along with the distinguished Deputy Permanent Representative of New Zealand to the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Philip Taula, sitting to my right. I would now like to give the floor to the members of the panel. In order to make the best use of the time available to us, I'd like to invite the panel members to limit their statements to not more than 10 minutes. I now move on to our last speaker. That is Mr. Johannes ANARI. He is from the Organisasi Pribumi Papua Barat. And Mr. ANARI has had his education in different parts of Indonesia, mostly in West Java and Central Java, and also in his college days, and lastly at the Indonesia Science Institute of Technology. So I'd like to welcome Mr. ANARI to join the discussion, please.
Dear Excellency, Chairperson of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Johannes ANARI. I am the leader of West Papua Indigenous Organization, but we changed to West Papua Liberation Organization, or WPLO. I offer my heartfelt thanks to the Permanent Forum for giving me this opportunity to address this forum. For benefit of the people of West Papua, I and West Papua Liberation Organization am asking this forum to understand both the cause of the conflict which we are suffering and the solution which the Economic and Social Council can provide for us. Most states that come into conflict with an indigenous community do so because the community has land or resources that the state wants. Unfortunately, West Papua had the misfortune of having gold and other minerals that certain American businessmen wanted. 20 years ago, Mr. Santon introduced the concept of 8 states of genocide. 8 steps which can condition a society to commit genocide. But I submit that the 4 indigenous communities there are normally only 2 states. Greed and deception. Greed is the motive, and deception includes all the lies that allege that and indigenous people are less entitled to their home and their lives. Nobody can prevent greed, but the deception can be fought with education and public awareness of the humanity of indigenous communities. If each of oppressed indigenous community had use of equipment and access to an independent media channel, the accidency of oppressive state might be peacefully reduced. Even a small deception can cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. For 54 years, West Papua have been victim of such a deception at the United Nations, alleging that reporting the progress of the colony could be exercised by the General Secretary UTAN instead of Trusteeship Council, as is required by the Charter of the United Nations. This is a deception which the Economic and Social Council can end this year by putting the issue of West Papua on the agenda of the Trusteeship Council, as should have been done in 1962. The indigenous people of West Papua are no less deserving than the other people of the protection promised by the Charter of the United Nations. So I again ask that this forum recommend to the Economic and Social Council that it put the international issue of the General Assembly Resolution 1752 on the agenda of the Trusteeship Council, as should have been done in 1962. I wish to explain briefly how West Papua became the subject of General Assembly Resolution 1752. I will continue using the name of West Papua, my homeland, although the United Nations during 1960s used title including Netherlands, New Guinea, or West New Guinea and West Irian. During the 19th and 20th century, West Papua permitted a Dutch presence, and in December 1950, the United Nations in General Assembly Resolution 448 on 5th session agreed that Netherlands owned an obligation to respect West Papua cultural, political, economic, and other rights. But in 1959, Mr. John Henderson proposed the United States could use an United Nations trusteeship to transfer the administration of West Papua to the United Nations and then to the Republic of Indonesia. And by March 1961, the United States believed that Indonesia, on condition that the trusteeship would not be called a trusteeship. We support would support the American plan for the United Nations trusteeship of West Papua. The Dutch tried to fight the American ambition in 1961 by asking the General Assembly to approve a normal United Nations trusteeship of West Papua. Unfortunately, the UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld was killed on 18 September 1961, 8 days before the Assembly's vote. And without the assistance of the Hammarskjöld advice, a bid for trusteeship that would have been reported to the the Trusteeship Council failed. In December 1961, the Republic of Indonesia began a small or token invasion of West Papua, after which the United States began negotiation asking the Netherlands to sign the United Nations Trusteeship Agreement, which the United States and Indonesia had been preparing since 1959. Indonesia released an American pilot, Mr. Allen Pope, in July 1962, an agreement asking the General Assembly to approve an United Nations occupation and administration of West Papua by signing the agreement and the Indonesian on 15 August 1962. On the next day, 16 August 1962, New York Times published a public endorsement by the new Secretary General proclaimed the benefit of agreement which had just been signed by the Netherlands and Indonesia. A month later, a draft text for the General Assembly resolution was presented to the United Nations membership on the day before they were asked without debate to vote on agreement asking the United Nations to occupy and administrate West Papua. The government of Benin, Mr. Dahomey, then expressed outrage that the people of West Papua had not been consulted and the agreement did not require that the indigenous people of West Papua permit to have a referendum. The government of Togo deplored the haste of the vote and the lack of time the UN member had read to the text of agreement. And 3 days later, the government of Senegal asked to change the record of its vote from affirmative to negative. Despite the haste of the vote, the General Assembly approved agreement, and 10 days later, on the 1st October 1962, the United Nations took over the administration of West Papua. Please understand, although U.S. record assert that Indonesia didn't want to call the trusteeship a trusteeship, that the first line of the 1962 agreement refers to the trusteeship relationship by saying that the purpose of the agreement is the interest and welfare of the people of the territory of West New Guinea or West Irian. In addition to the agreement, the physical act of occupying West Papua also placed the United Nations into the position of a trustee administration the territory for benefit of the people of West Papua. And that event should also have been reported to Trusteeship Council by means of the agenda of the Trusteeship Council in accordance with Article 85, Part 2 of the Charter of the United Nations. I also remind this forum and remind the Economic and Social Council that Article 103 of the Charter of the United Nations does not permit any obligation of charter to be mitigated or feared by any agreement. Therefore, request in the 1962 agreement asking the Secretary General receive and distribute information about West Papua does not extinguish the obligation of the United Nations described in Article 85, Part 2 of the Charter of the United Nations. It is Article 85, Part 2 of the Charter of the United Nations that entitle West Papua to make this request for this forum to recommend to the Economic and Social Council that it put the international issue of General Assembly Resolution 1752 on the agenda of the Trusteeship Council. Any debate about the Charter of the United Nations obligation is in the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice, from whom the Trusteeship Council will be asking for any advisory opinion once the issue of the General Assembly Resolution 171 and the General Resolution 1752 are put on the Council's agenda, as should have been done in September 1962. In the name of the Lord, I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. ANARI.
At time, and we're about to lose our interpretation and sound, so we won't have time to give the floor to the other panelists. I apologize for that. And I also want to acknowledge we had many requests from Indigenous groups, other member states, including one member state who wanted to respond to a statement from the floor. But unfortunately, we won't have time. I have been told there is an opportunity this afternoon for a member state to speak. But other than that, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank our panelists, and it's been an honor to participate in this session, and I'll hand over to our chair to conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank everyone for their participation as well as your understanding. Some participants did not speak. We'll begin with these speakers this afternoon, recognizing that the theme of conflict and peace is a dynamic which has to be discussed and thought about, and the participation was extremely useful. I thank Roy, the ambassador, for conducting this. I thank all of the participants for their participation. This afternoon at 3 p.m., the forum will continue consideration of item 5, a debate on the indigenous people, conflict, peace, and resolution. The meeting will take place here in this conference hall. The meeting is adjourned.